by pulling the troops before getting these Americans who are now stranded. Does he have a sense of that?
First of all, I think it's irresponsible to say Americans are stranded. They are not. We are committed to bringing Americans who want to come home, to return home.
There are no Americans stranded is the White House's official position on what's happening in Afghanistan right now.
I'm just calling you out for saying that we are stranding Americans in Afghanistan when we have been very clear that we are not leaving Americans who want to return home. We are going to bring them home.
That's why, by the way, it happens to be in Asia for me right now, but that's why we have a female vice president of the United States of America we're going to have some presidents pretty soon.
On the issue of Afghanistan. And to that end, we have seen a successful drawdown of the embassy.
If you need to check the number, I mean, that's the most important number here, the number of Americans. So if it's just a matter of checking the number, can you do that and give it to us? Or if you're being deliberately vague, tell me why you're being deliberately vague.
I think I'm just going to leave it at several thousand right now, Dave.
Well, then tell us why.
Because I think the number is very fluid, and it literally changes nearly by the hour.
It's not more fluid than these 11,000, 37,000.
I'm going to leave it at several thousand right now. Wafa.
And in his speech in April, and in his speech in July, and in comments he has made since then, he has been clear that that could mean difficult times in Afghanistan. We have been clear-eyed about this from the start.
And how do you think the world is looking at the United States right now?
So on the second question, you look at the scenes at the Kabul airport, and what I see is the United States securing an airfield at the risk of several thousand American troops. This is an enormous logistical, diplomatic, security, humanitarian undertaking. There is no other country in the world who could pull something like this off, bar none. So that's what I say to the second question.
And that some staff reported being separated from children. They said, quote, "It would be better to die under the Taliban's bullet than face the crowds again." One staff member said they felt betrayed, that it was it undermined their sense of dignity, their loyalty. And this is embassy staff who should have been presumably prioritized, that they were left behind when the evacuation took place, basically.
Andrea, what I can tell you...
I do have a follow-up.
Sure. I will tell you that I just came from a meeting with the Secretary about an hour and a half ago. And this was something that he proactively raised in that setting. And he also conveyed it was something that he has discussed with the President.
Yeah, is there any effort to tally up the number of U.S. weapons and equipment that are now under Taliban control? And is there any program to mitigate this problem through destruction or confiscating them back, taking them back?
Yeah, Mike, we talked about this before. I don't have an exact inventory of what equipment that the Afghans had at their disposal that now might be at risk. We have a vested interest, obviously, in not wanting that to happen. But I don't have any policy solutions for you today about how we would or could address that going forward.
A question on the public response. A new poll out today shows Americans wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan, but they disapprove of the way you've handled it. The poll also found that based in part on what's transpired in the last week, a majority of Americans, and forgive me, I'm just the messenger, no longer consider you to be competent, focused, or effective in the job.
I haven't seen that poll.
It's out there from CBS this morning. What would you say?
People who are being evacuated who are Americans and the number who are Afghans, but that's something that reporters have been asking for and not getting for several days. Do you have those numbers? And if not, when could we expect to see them?
I certainly understand the question. I know that my colleague John Kirby said a few thousand Americans have been evacuated earlier today. As Jake noted, the vast majority have been Afghans, given this size of the population that we are moving out. And I'm happy to also follow up after the briefing and see what information we can achieve. Go ahead.
Need more time beyond August 31st to get all U.S. personnel and Afghan people out of the country?
As I said, the President believes we are making substantial progress. Dozens of flights, thousands, now tens of thousands of people evacuated from the country. We believe today will be an efficient and effective day, and tomorrow and the next day as well. And as I said, he is taking this day by day and will make his determinations as we go.
How many Americans have been evacuated? I think you gave 2,500 Americans. Has that number changed?
We think that overall we've been able to evacuate several thousand Americans, and I'd be reticent to get more specific than that. But since the 14th, we believe we have been able to evacuate several thousand Americans.
What's your response to reports of Americans?
Hold on. Slow down, everybody. I want to talk about two things. First, Afghanistan.
Let me be clear. The evacuation of thousands of people from Kabul is going to be hard and painful, no matter when it started, when we began. It would have been true if we had started a month ago or a month from now. There is no way to evacuate this many people without pain and loss of heartbreaking images you see on television. It's just a fact.
Here's another statement that the president made that was flat wrong. Take a look.
I have seen no question of our credibility from our allies around the world. I've spoken with our NATO allies. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite I've gotten.
But Armin Laschet, the likely successor to German Chancellor Merkel, said this is the biggest debacle that NATO has seen since its foundation. And here is the chairman of the British Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee.
To see their commander-in-chief call into question the courage of men I fought with, to claim that they ran, it's shameful. Those who have never fought for the colours they fly should be careful about criticising those who have.
So this is a shame on all of us, not just America, but also the whole of NATO.
Mr. Secretary, does the president not know what's going on?
Of the Taliban's requirements to let people leave the country.
Respectfully, look, I'm not questioning whether or not the allies have a right to complain. I'm not questioning whether or not al-Qaeda has a presence. The president said al-Qaeda is gone. It's not gone. The president said he's not heard any criticism from the allies. There's been a lot of criticism from the allies. Words matter, and the words of the president matter most.
That Americans were beaten there. So can you confirm that first off? And this is the first indication of what yet to come by the Taliban.
It's difficult for us to speak to reports that are anecdotal, that may be on social media. The reports we can speak to are those.
The Secretary told congressional leaders, according to politics.
The reports we can speak to are those reports that we have heard firsthand.
And it continues to be the case that many Afghans and many American citizens and lawful permanent residents as well have not been able to get through. Are you denying, is the administration denying, as the president did earlier, that is the case?
I don't think anyone is denying the reports that are out there.
We have no indication that they haven't been able to get in Kabul through the airport. We've made an agreement with the Taliban thus far. They've allowed them to go through.
But the president just said that there is no al-Qaeda presence in Afghanistan. That does not seem to be correct.
What we don't think is that what we believe is that there isn't a presence that is significant enough to merit a threat to our homeland.
Secretary Austin specifically acknowledged that Americans were being beaten on their way to the airport. Can you give us any more detail about who these Americans are that Secretary Austin was talking about?
Courtney, we've actually been talking about this for several days here at this particular podium. We know of cases, a small number that we know of. By and large, most Americans are having no problems that we're aware of. Now, I have to caveat it, and I'll do it again, and I've done it every day. We are aware of sporadic cases where they aren't being allowed, where there is some harassment going on, and yes, some physical violence has occurred.
2 days before Kabul fell, you said from that podium, quote, "The city is not right now in any imminent threat environment." How could you get that so wrong?
In the moment that I said it, Lucas, it was true. And I understand. I've seen the reactions out there on social media to what I said.
With Taliban.
In the moment that I said it, based on what we knew at the time, it was a true statement. And yes, 2 days later, things dramatically changed.
I can't think of anyone better to lead this operation than Deanne Criswell of FEMA. If you go to vaccines.com, vaccines.com, or text your zip code to 438829. May God protect our troops and our diplomats and who are serving in harm's way. Now, I'll take a few questions. Darlene from the Associated Press.
Mr. President, thank
Yes.
you.
That there's a lot less visibility the farther you go out into the city, and that's possibly where there might be threats of kidnapping, or is that what really we're trying to avoid here?
There's a whole panoply of security concerns that we have. And again, to my answer to Courtney, this is a non-combatant evacuation. That's what we're focused on. And so the idea, as the general very clearly indicated in his opening statement, is to get as many people out as we can.
What is your message to America's partners around the world who have criticized not the withdrawal, but the conduct of that withdrawal and made them question America's credibility on the world stage?
I have seen no question of our credibility from our allies around the world. I've spoken with our NATO allies. We've spoken with NATO allies, the Secretary of State. Our National Security Advisor has been in contact with his counterparts throughout the world and our allies, as has the general, I keep calling him a general, but my Secretary of Defense. The fact of the matter is, I have not seen that. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite I've gotten. The exact opposite thing is we're acting with dispatch. We're acting, committing to what we said we would do. Look, thank you. May God bless you, our troops, and our diplomats, and all those serving in harm's way. And now I'll take questions. AP, Zeke Miller.
Stay past the 31st to make that happen, to bring all the Americans out, to bring those SIVs out?
I think we can get it done by then, but we're going to make that judgment as we go. And we're working on a variety to verify that number of the Americans are still in country as we work on this, because don't have the exact number of people who are Americans are there, and those who may have come home to the United States. We want to get a strong number as to exactly how many people are there, how many American citizens, and where they are. Just yesterday.
But will you sign off on sending U.S. troops into Kabul to evacuate Americans who haven't been able to get to the airport safely?
We have no indication that they haven't been able to get in Kabul through the airport. We've made an agreement with the Taliban thus far. They've allowed them to go through. It's in their interest for them to go through. So we know of no circumstance where American citizens are carrying an American passport are trying to get through to the airport.
That doesn't really square with the images we're seeing around the airport, with the reporting on the ground from our colleagues who are describing chaos and violence. Are you saying unequivocally that any American who wants to get to the airport is getting there and getting past the security barrier and to the planes where they want to go?
I thought the question was, how can they get through to the airport outside the airport? And the answer is, to the best of our knowledge, the Taliban checkpoints, they are letting through people showing American passports. Now, that's a different question when they get in the rush and crowd of all the folks just outside the wall near the airport. That's why we had to, I guess, was it yesterday or the day before, we went over the wall and brought in, how many? 169 Americans.
Why do you continue to trust their pledges, Mr. President? One more question, Mr. President, please.
And you don't see as great of a threat of terrorism from Afghanistan as other parts of the world. But if you and your administration so badly misassessed how quickly the Taliban would sweep through Afghanistan, and we no longer have an embassy there from which to run intelligence operations, how can you at all be confident of your assessment of the risk of terrorism and the ability of the U.S. to conduct over-the-horizon missions to keep it in check? Can you tell Americans that they're safe and will remain safe from terror attacks in Afghanistan?
I think you're comparing apples and oranges. One question was whether or not the Afghan forces we trained up would stay and fight in their own civil war they had going on. No one, shouldn't say no one, the consensus was that it was highly unlikely that in 11 days they'd collapse and fall and the leader of Afghanistan would flee the country. That's a very different question than whether or not there is the ability to observe whether or not large groups of terrorists began to accumulate in a particular area in Afghanistan to plot against the United States of America.
Sir, just on that initial assessment, we learned over the last 24 hours that there was a descent cable from the State Department.
Sure.
saying that the Taliban would come faster through Afghanistan. Can you say why, after that cable was issued, the U.S. didn't do more to get Americans
got
out?
All kinds of cables, all kinds of advice. If you notice, it ranged from this group saying that they didn't say it'd fall when it would fall, when it did fall, but saying that it would fall, to others saying it wouldn't happen for a long time and they'd be able to sustain themselves through the end of the year. I made the decision. The buck stops with me. I took the consensus opinion. The consensus opinion was that, in fact, it would not occur, if it occurred, until later in the year.
Fully explain why the plan wasn't to go ahead with these evacuations of both Americans and allies before the drawdowns began, before Bagram was closed, looking back several months, because whether it was now or several months from now, there seems to be a broad consensus that the Taliban would make these gains and these would be needed at some point.
Well, yeah, at some point. But the point was that although we were in contact with the Taliban and Doha for this whole period of time, that some point wasn't expected to be the total demise of the Afghan National Force, which was 300 persons.
We did contingency planning, but none of us can appreciate what happens when the end of a civil war takes place and the victors enter the city.
Left tens of billions of dollars worth of U.S. military equipment in the hands of the Taliban. There were helicopters, guns, ammunition. How much has that raised the threat of future terrorist attacks, this well-armed Taliban?
This is what happens when you withdraw. Some stuff, some equipment is left there.
We've talked about the Taliban once. They may end up not really caring at the end of the day. And so how can all of these aspirations be enforced?
They may not care about these ephemeral concepts like legitimacy and recognition.
If they haven't in the past.
Their past behavior suggests that, correct.
So there's not a whole lot of confidence that they won't change their...
But what this does, this has... The question was not about the airport, Rich. I'm happy to talk about the airport.
Yes. Yes, let's talk
about
the airport.
out of Brussels
We're hearing that flights are leaving don't mean
I am answering the question that was asked of me. If you would like to go to another topic, we certainly can.
What this says about the competency of this mission and also the U.S. confidence in the Taliban's commitment to provide a safe passage to the airport, that you're telling these Americans, you can go to the airport if you want, but you're not necessarily going to get there safely.
It is difficult under any circumstances, and I don't know of any government that would be capable of reaching out to where everybody might be, particularly those who have not signed up to us to help them. As I said, so far, the track record is quite good for Americans getting to HYGO, and it appears that the Taliban's commitment for safe passage for American citizens has been solid.
Should the Biden administration have had a stronger U.S. military presence for the transition?
Well, first may I just say that I commend the president for the action that he took. It was strong, it was decisive, and it was the right thing to do.
And we have maintained the ability to have an over-the-horizon capability to take them out. We don't have military in Syria to make sure that we're going to be protected. But no one's being killed right now. God forgive me if I'm wrong about that, but no one's being killed right now.
COVID. When you guys pulled people out of different countries during COVID,
Christina,
you would give us a country
we're
by country
talking about a
breakdown.
very different universe here. We're talking about American citizens. We're talking about third country nationals. We're talking about Afghan nationals.
Citizens. We're asking about American citizens.
Specifically
you
American
know
citizens.
how many Americans have contacted you and asked to get out. Why can't you tell us?
Kind of list, right?
We've seen the reports of congestion. My understanding is that things are moving quite efficiently at this hour.
We can get on. But if the British can take their paratroopers and they can get in vehicles and go get their people and get them to the airport, why can't the U.S. do that?
We have not seen any great impediments to the safe passage that the Taliban have agreed to facilitate. Americans are getting through those checkpoints, and they.
I told our allies that no matter what the outcome of our review, the United States will not undertake a hasty or disorderly withdrawal from Afghanistan that puts their forces or the alliance's reputation at risk.
What you are not saying, though, I'm hearing in there that you are prepared
to leave people behind.
We're doing everything we can to get as many people out who want to get out before the August 31st deadline.
And as the Secretary himself said when we were in Kabul just a couple of weeks ago, that he's confident that whatever the decision is, if that decision involves a withdrawal, that General Miller and General McKenzie will be able to do so in a safe, orderly, and effective way.
The White House press corps and the American people have a lot of direct questions for him. Will he take those today?
The president never shies away from taking questions. I'll let him make a decision. If he is always willing to take questions, and I'll let him decide if he's going to do that after his remarks today.